out here. This is the field where the magic happens.
Benning Bites with Damon Benning. Benning Bites with Damon Benning.
Another episode of Benning Bites. Welcome. However you get us, we appreciate it. YouTube, Facebook, Apple, Spotify, regular old 590. However you do it. One of my besties, one of my old bosses used to tell me, Mike Thompson, shout out, former ESPN exec. He said, you know what? However people consume it, it is still AM radio. So shout out Mike Thompson. Good man. Good man. Taught me a lot. I had an interesting question this morning. We were talking about Nebraska basketball and Creighton basketball and the transfer portal. And one of the questions that I got I thought was interesting. And the question was, should Coach Hoiberg have a Coach Rhule moment and go to the podium and talk about transfer portals and NIL dollars and what it takes to get good players? I thought about that for a second because I knew with Coach Rhule it was intentional, right? Like I think he really wanted to get his arms around NIL and kind of what it took and what the landscape looked like so everybody knew what they were talking about when they say things like, hey, how about going to get such and such in the portal? Or because we have all of these ideas, no matter, one, if they're really in the portal or not, or two, if it's even feasible. And I got to thinking about it during the show, and I'm like, I don't know. Like, is that in Coach Hoiberg's, is that in his personality? Is that in his MO? Is there a market that we just don't know about? Hey, quality point guards are this. Hey, if I want an athletic wing, it's this. And then Coach Hoiberg has to then come to grips and say, hey, you know what? I love our chemistry. I like what's going on. So no matter what we do in the transfer portal, or if we do anything at all, it needs to look like this. This is what we had this year from a chemistry standpoint is really what I'm after. So we were very careful in terms of who we brought in, right? Bryce had to have a certain temperament. Rank had to have a certain temperament in order to go with the team. So, like, that's part of it. And if it gets a price tag, I don't know. Is there kind of a set market? You know, in football where they have a little more money to spend on NIL, there seems to have been kind of an established market, and that's what Coach Rhule was letting us know about. So I don't know. And the other thing that goes along with that is, what do they have coming back in terms of a culture? Because it appears to be set, right? So it's just not as simply as easy as like assigning a dollar figure and then saying, okay, we need to go get that guy, because it has to fit. Because I think what he's establishing the last year and a half, the second half of last season and this season is a trajectory for Nebraska basketball. And so it takes some thinking, it takes some due diligence. And I think now maybe Nebraska's getting to the point where they're paying careful mind to fit. Because I think the first couple of years under Coach Hoiberg's tenure, I'm not saying that those teams weren't enjoyable to coach, but you could tell from his personality and what he said and how he talked to the media this year, there was this level of trust that he had with his teammates or his coaching staff and his team, that what he was saying to us publicly wasn't the first time that they'd heard it, number one. And two, that they could handle what was being said. He was very forthright, and I felt like he was spectacular through the media in terms of telling us what we need to know and the messages that he wanted to convey. And I know sometimes we take that for granted as fans that consume the information. Well, just say this. And oftentimes your team's temperament or their volatility sometimes can dictate that when your culture isn't set. So I think he's got to really, really take a good hard look at that staff with Coach Howard and Coach Lenzer and the whole bunch there when they go to look at the portal. But I thought it was a really interesting question, especially on the heels of or in the morning of Nebraska starts spring football practice, because what is everybody's eyes going to gravitate towards? I mean, Banks is obviously the hot story right now in the receiving corps because of his leadership qualities, and he's one of those big body guys that I think is a little different than anybody else on Nebraska's roster. But it's the quarterback spot. And should Nebraska, this is on the cusp of, or on the aftermath of us talking to Sam McEwen Monday when he said, be curious to see after spring you just go get a quarterback. And I'm like, I don't know if it's that easy, right? You just go get a quarterback out of the portal. And will Nebraska need to get a quarterback out of the portal? I think those guys will be in green jerseys. You have to be kind of careful because you don't have a ton of depth. Would you like to have another? Absolutely. Well, as spring goes on, will you feel the need to get another? How will you play as an offense? Because sometimes how you want to play as an offense can give you an idea. It's not foolproof, but if listen, they're not design quarterback runs, and QB run game isn't a huge part of it. You're less vulnerable to having your quarterbacks in harm's way, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to get hurt either. I always say quarterbacks that are mobile stand a better chance of operating outside the pocket and staying safe than they do in the pocket and getting unexpected hits, right? Like that's kind of a real thing. So, for Nebraska's quarterback situation, do they feel that they'll need to address it after the spring, and what does that market even look like? But for now, we're going to enjoy the ride. We've seen some of the snippets, the practice pictures come out, and the highlights. And believe me, they're very intentional. Like, they're just not going all willy-nilly with video and who is getting pictures sent out on social media from the football account. So deciphering the message that they're trying to tell us is another thing, but don't think that those videos and pictures come out by accident. They highlight who they want to highlight for specific reasons, usually ones in which only they know. And that's how that goes. We'll keep you posted. This will be the place, I think, where you can get a good chunk of your coverage for Nebraska spring ball. I'll try to give you some insight, keep you educated. If not, you fine folks can educate us, because Lord knows we could always use a little babysitting. At least me anyway. I don't want to speak for Ravi. He does just fine on his own managing this shaky boat on Hurrdat Sports Radio. So make sure you're a part of what we're doing every morning, 7 to 10. We appreciate you. It's another episode of Benning Bites.